council meeting to order. Please rise for the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could you please remain standing? This past week we lost two individuals who have great impact, one nationally and one locally. And so in honor of Senator John McCain, who served this country for a number of years honorably and nobly and fiery, I could say, passed away this past week, and so we want to remember him. As well as Jenny Wallace, who was a regular here at our meetings, who kept us on track, who asked tough questions and held us to the fire, and by God, she was going to get answers, and she got them. So in honor of those two people, I wish that we would have a moment of silence. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall. Here. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Ms. Stevenson.
Present.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Here.
Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Breeden.
Here.
We have 6 members present, so we will proceed. We have several amendments to the agenda. Since the original agenda went out, I asked Mrs. Hill to add the swearing in of Norwood police officers, which we will do right after the minutes, as well as the request for executive session and the CVS liquor transfer. I would like to, those communications, I would like to switch to do the CVS liquor license transfer first, and then the executive session second. Also, want to add the committee of the whole report under standing reports of committee. And under the administration reports, the mayor has requested that he be permitted to speak regarding the 911 system. So those are the amendments to the agenda that have been requested. Mr. Braden.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we amend the agenda as stated.
Seconded by Mrs. Hannerhan. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next are the minutes of the previous meeting, August 14th, 2018. They were previously distributed by email by Mr. Gears. Mr. Clark.
Move to approve the minutes as of read.
Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. It is my distinct pleasure to ask Chief Kramer to come up and introduce our 6 new police officers and Captain Bellman, who will be sworn in this evening by the mayor. If you could, if you're going to do introductions,
Okay.
Could you stand by the microphone so people at home could hear?
Sure. I'm Chief Kramer, this is Captain Bellman. I want to thank the mayor and council for allowing us to do this at council tonight. This is pretty important. Also want to thank all the families that came out to celebrate their loved ones' great accomplishment of joining the Norwood Police Department. I think there's a lot of things right with Norwood going on. I mean, you can go on social media and you find some negative stuff, but there's a lot right going on. And the 6 people I'm going to call up here right now are a few of those things that are going right, that are going good. I'm excited to have these 6 as part of our crew. We've hired 12 new police officers in the last year, and it's an exciting time for the Norwood Police Department. These 6 will be learning how to be a Norwood police officer, have been learning how to be an Norwood police officer for about a month now with their FTOs, and I've only heard good things about them. And I look forward to what the future holds. Before I forget, I'll tell you this: after we get done here, come over to the police department. We've got some refreshments, and they can show you around. So I'll get started with the introduction. So if I could have first up here, Jimmy Holdren. Just very brief in the bio. Jimmy Holdren came to us. He is not our typical. Come up here, Jimmy.
Can you come up here and then just
right in
face the
front,
audience?
Face that way. Jimmy's it's not our typical recruit. Jimmy retired as a lieutenant with the Cincinnati Fire Department. Before that, he did 8 years as a tanker in the Army. We're excited to have Jimmy. Carlos Cortez. Carlos is from El Salvador. He is a certified police officer and has spent some time working in, is it Owensville? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Owensville. Next up would be Margaret Caskey. Margaret comes to us. She came from the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. She's been down there for a little while working in corrections. Kendall Gent. So Kendall is a lifetime Norwood resident. Is that right, Kendall? Yep. This is Kendall's first police job. So we are also excited to have Kendall. Ryan Ramos. Ryan came to us from the Village of Fairfax Police Department. He had been there for quite a few years. He's an experienced officer. Last up, Jeffrey Stam. Jeffrey also comes to us from the Village of Fairfax Police Department. He was a training officer there and also comes here with quite a bit of experience. So we're excited to have these 6. And from here, we're going to turn it over to the
Chief,
mayor.
can I ask, of each one of them assigned a training officer?
They are. So,
Are they here? Could we have them stand up?
You know
the
what?
training
I don't
officers?
think
Any of them
any
here?
of them are here. So yes, I'm sorry. Brian Hoffman trains Ryan Ramos, and Brad Chapman trains. Brad, just step forward. Sir. Brad Chapman trains Margaret Caskey. We also Rocky Siegel trains Carlos Cortez. Kendall Gent's FTO is Matt Scheidler. Jimmy Holdren's is Kenneth Devers. And Jeffrey Stams is Officer Phil Harvey. We had training today all day, so a lot of those guys were at training and I'm sure are tired. But I'm glad that you mentioned that because the FTOs have a really tough job and it's a lot of work. Not that these guys are tough, but just in general, it's a lot of work and every one of them do an outstanding job. So thank you, Brian. One last thing, the mayor's going to say "I," okay, and then you are going to state your actual name. So, is that good?
Yeah, I wasn't my idea. He doesn't think you could follow the rest.
Not true. I heard the whole conversation back there.
I technical stuff first. I was the same. He's from Fort Hood. That's okay. I was there in '59. we had to start on time. I'm going to stand off to the side so y'all see your loved ones. If y'all raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear to abide by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. The Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio. The law and ordinance of the City of Norwood. And to execute the duties of my office as a police officer. I'll slow down. Of the Norwood Police Department to the best of my ability. So help me God. Congratulations. Don't mind us, just go ahead.
Do any of you want to say anything?
Welcome aboard.
Chief Kramer, thank you for the opportunity to have this happen in council. Often we don't know when new police officers are sworn in, and so on behalf of council, I'm sure I'm expressing for them our appreciation for doing this at a council meeting. So thank you.
I'll send them to you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
They got a sense of humor. Did you see how he yelled at Chief? I thought it was funny. You know, when they're in front of their families, I guess it's nervous. Joe Shea and Charlie Fritz were standing there, and I wasn't allowed to police.
We'll just wait a few minutes.
Are you kidding? With the young red kid.
Okay, we will move on with our agenda. We have one request to address council, but it is not on an agenda item, so we'll defer that to a little later on. Next are reports of standing committees of council, and I have a committee of the whole report dated 8/28/2018 to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. We, your committee of the whole, to whom was referred Trex liquor license transfer to Fueled Collective, beg leave to submit the following report. Information was given by Drew Chalfant regarding Fueled Collective's expansion and possible need for a second liquor license. They hope to obtain an expansion license, but are pursuing a Trex transfer in the event that it is needed. If the expansion license is granted, they will not purchase the license, but will forfeit their 10% deposit. Respectfully submitted, Donna Lake Chairperson, James Bonsall, Andrew Clark, Leslie Stevenson, Marilyn Hanrahan, Joseph Sanker, excuse me, and John Braden. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move that we accept the committee report and we authorize the Clerk of Council to sign the Trex form on behalf of the Fueled Collective.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Braden. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. So we got a great opportunity today to hear from the Fueled Collective people, and the stuff that they're doing there, it's really exciting with the co-working spaces, with the, I guess, the banquet hall and other things, and I'm pretty excited to have them here and to make sure that to see them do well. So I haven't had anybody come forth, any other liquor license holder that I've heard of, come forth and say, hey, I'm trying to sell mine, and let us know the price. So I think in order just to facilitate the economic development, considering how many of our quota licenses are currently tied up, I guess, in Brookwood. And Brookwood's a regional destination, so for most cities, their quota licenses would be more tied up inside the city. For us, it's really on that regional destination, kind of on the edge there. So personally, I think it's a good thing to allow them to have it.
Any other discussion? Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you. I don't recall if this was in the report, but I think the main distinction that came to light in our discussion that I took note of was that these are two different leases the company has in Rookwood, and so we're actually authorizing two different properties under the same company.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. And as I said, they hope to get the expansion license. Mr. Chalfant did say that the Ohio Department of Liquor Control had been at their facility and did the inspection, and they're just waiting for those results. Any other discussion? So the motion on the floor is to receive and file the committee of the whole report and to approve the signing for the transfer of the Trex license into Fueled Collective. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have no ordinances or resolutions, so we will move on to administration reports. Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Madam President.
You want to read that while we're waiting? No, maybe not.
As you know, the subject of the 911 Communication Center has been discussed over and over and over.
Can you pull the mic up a little closer? There you go. Maybe it won't stay.
This is about the fourth or fifth time the 911 system has been reviewed. Come on, Mark. And every time it comes out the same. So what we did this time was I asked the chief and Lieutenant Rankin to do the investigation. These numbers and these conclusions are not coming from me. They are coming from the chief and the lieutenant. Let's get that clear. Second of all, the numbers are one thing, and I think they speak for themselves. The other issues, there's technical issues, and that will come into play in this. So, in the past, we've had people say, when I made the statement in the commission that I thought the prices would go up, I couldn't say my source because it was the chief who talked to other people. What the chief did is he went out and talked to different departments throughout the county, got their input, went downtown and talked to a chief that had been downtown and talking to the county. So the background work was done by him in that area. The other work was done by Lieutenant Rankin, who handled most of the technical questions with software and radios and all that other thing. We sat down with Andy Knapp several times. Andy was always a straight dealer. The previous head of the communication center was not like that. Andy is a straight up guy. His job is to, if he can get us in there, get somebody into it, that's what he's supposed to do. But he never deceived anything, was always straight up and even. There will be some benefits when we keep this to work with Andy, and we can get some cost-saving training or whatever we can out of it. So, without further discussion from me, I'll let Mark take this over. He can talk to you about the system. The other thing is, Cincinnati. The reason why this is kind of pressing is Cincinnati Bell will be out of the 911 business come the end of the year. So we are obligated. We are in fact put on the line that we have to go with another system. And so he'll give you the particulars on the system, but the way I understand it, what we will be paying for the system will not be any more than what we're paying right now. I'm going to use this one example, Mark, if I'm wrong. Mark explained it to me. We'll say that the fireworks are down and there's a lot of fireworks in one area and you're getting several calls from a square block area. And then all of a sudden you get another call up on your screen is from another area. Somebody could be having a heart attack and they're calling. You can hit that, am I right? You can hit that and bypass all those other multiple calls that are coming from the same area and get to that person. That's the technology that's available. Also, Mark tells me that under this new system, people will be able to text 911. If you recall, that was discussed in Cincinnati. So these are just a few of the highlights. Mark can talk about the numbers and the discussions he's had. You got it, Mark?
Well, I'm not too sure if somebody wants to let me know how you want to handle this. I can go through the report that you have, or we can just open questions on the floor. We can take it from there. Anyone?
Why don't you go to the report first?
Go through the report.
Please.
Okay, the way we did this is we took Norwood's communications cost, that's the $853,000. We took that's all encompassing. That's what the auditor tells us we spent in the year 2017 for everything encompassing the Norwood Communications Center. So that's what we spent. And the Hamilton County line, we broke that down into costs to make the transfer. The top line is what me and the chief feel was about a minimum call for service cost that we would come up with. We based that off of about 15,100 and some odd calls for service. I didn't bring that detailed stuff, but we based it off of what the chief pulled out of our CAD system of what he believed was the number of calls that would be billable if we switched to the county. The MARC system is a system we have to pay for because it's a connectivity system that we purchased, and we have that on a lease program. We've got to pay that off. So it's a lease to own kind of thing. So I think we owe 4 or 5 years on that to get that paid off.
And the system is still good?
It'll still be fine after that. Okay. It's a connectivity. It basically connects our radio system to the cell phone tower system. So
I just wanted to make it very clear for people that this was not something we're paying for and not using.
Right.
We are still using the MARC system.
Yes.
Thank you.
By switching to the county, there's a lot of clerical duties that still have to be done by dispatchers or by clerical personnel, and to employ one person to do that job round the clock, and a number of part-timers to fill in their vacation, sick time, things like that. Those are what those two cost. The 3 FT Norwood clerks are full-time clerks. That's based on the auditor's number for the cost of a full-time clerk.
You're talking just yearly?
Yearly.
Okay, thank you.
The 6 PT is 6 part-time clerks. That's based on the number of hours. Basically, when we add up all the hours that a dispatcher can take off work, sick, vacation, city time, all those hours, and then have to fill those plus fill the weekends to make one person round the clock, that puts those 6 clerks, those 6 part-time clerks, getting 20 hours apiece a week. So they're only allowed to work 29 hours a week, but we based it off of 20 because all the part-time clerks have other jobs. So it'll fluctuate. One might get 29 one week, one might get 16, but giving them 20 hours a week comes out to about $150,000 for a year. So there's those costs. 911 funds, we get between $60,000 and $80,000 a year in 911 funds. We know that number is going to go up. We're going to get more money in maybe as early as next year. It may be a little after that, but we're not exactly sure when that's going to come about. But we know that number will go up. So between 60 and 80, put in the middle at 70. If we switch to the county, we got to give them that money, so they get that money as well. So that's $70,000 we won't get. Now we get that money now. But what I didn't do on our end, and try to stay with me here a bit, we get $70,000 in 911 funds to use for 911 items that affect our 911 system. We don't spend that whole $70,000 every year. There's always a carryover. So I just called that a wash because we do buy some miscellaneous things, pay for some warranties, pay for some services, buy equipment out of that $70,000, but we never spend the whole $70,000. So I didn't give it to us because I didn't want to say, well, we got 70 last year and we only spent 6. I think we spent 50, so we carried over 20. We just washed it all together. So it's a benefit. The numbers are a little less because the deficit would be a lot greater if I put actual numbers in a 911 fund. Okay, so did I explain that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The Agile Network is a system we have to maintain. It's basically it's $1,240 a month. If we switch to the county, we still got to pay it. If we keep our center, we pay that anyways. It's a thing for our radios. We pay that every month. But dispatch pays it out of the 911 fund. So I didn't put it in our costs, but I assigned it to the county because we will have to pay it if it comes out of that 911 fund. The $70,000, we pay it out of that. So that's why I gave it to the county. Yes.
Thank you. So you're saying that the $70,000 we're going to be paying next year. So whether we go to county or not, we're still having to pay.
If you buy a car and you decide to drive your wife's car, you still got to pay for your car. So we bought that equipment, we've got to pay for it for the next 4 to 5 years.
That's the marks, but he's talking about the 70,000 that you're going to get in 911.
No, well, I am talking about the 70. I was talking about the mark.
Oh, okay.
So I guess I'm just curious, why are we? So are you saying like next year we're not going to have the 70,000 cost if we stay with Norwood? Like what? I don't understand why there's 70,000 for Hamilton County and not 70,000.
Because the $70,000 marks cost is built into the 853. That's everything we spent on dispatch.
Okay.
Minus what I spent out 911 funds, and the 911 funds were less than we got in. So each year we carry over a profit off the 911. I want to say this, that from 17 to 18 we carried $20,000 over. But I didn't include that. I thought it would be more difficult to try to say, well, what do you spend for that? Well, one of the things we pay is the Agile network. We pay that out of 911. And if we go to the county, that $70,000 that we were using for these miscellaneous costs goes to the county. So that's why the Agile followed as well.
And then the cost for the 70,000 cost for the funds that we're not going to get. You're saying that the state's going to be giving more money for 911 dispatch centers in the future?
Yes.
Okay, and that it's going to be 70,000 above and beyond last year we received in the 57,000. It'll be above and beyond that, so it'll be a total of 100 something thousand.
Is that number based on the fiscal year, or
it's just based on what we received in, the auditors, what we received into the city on a calendar year basis. So we said it was $57,000 last year. So I guess just the question is it going to be, and maybe that won't be the exact number, but is this 70,000 additional dollars, or is it 70,000 total dollars when we get the new money?
No. The 70,000 is an average number that we get from 911. It ranges between $60,000 and $80,000 a year. Is about what we get from 911.
Okay.
Can you say that again?
Ms. Stevenson?
I'm having trouble hearing
Let's see if we can get a little closer. Okay, the $70,000 is an average number. It's $60,000 to $80,000 is what we're estimated to get through 911 funds.
And those are fees that you pay on your telephone service.
Yeah, every cell phone pays a quarter.
Right.
There's legislation in place now that
to increase
that number, as well as add home phones and some other things. So we know the numbers are going to go up. We don't know how much they're going to go up, and we don't know how much we're going to receive. We just, everybody involved in the 911 program agrees that some more funds will come in. We don't know if it's going to be 10% or be 50%, but it'll be a decent amount of money more. It won't stay the same. It will go up.
So the point is that if we would go to the county, then the county would get that money that we would normally
if they answer our 911 calls, they get the 911 money.
Sure. But we would still have to maintain the Agile network
it's one of
to the
systems.
tune of $1,240 a month.
Yes.
Thank you.
So why is that
Mr.
added in? Thank you so much. Sorry, Madam President. Why is that added in as a cost? Because we're not going to spend 70,000 next year.
No, but we have to. If I hand you $50 today, and tomorrow I don't hand you $50, you're losing that money. So we're losing that 911 money. So it's not added on our side because I just considered it a wash because we do pay a lot of items out of it, but we always have a carryover. If we go to the county gets that money. That's money we're not getting.
Okay, but you've already, I guess the thing is so we're going to be paying, we'll go down the line. We're going to be paying for the PSAP. We're going to be paying, we'll paying for Hamilton County to dispatch. I guess that's the calls for service, $389,000. We're paying for marks. We're paying for the clerks, $292,000 for the full-time clerks, $150,000 for the part-time. And then we're paying for the Agile network. But I don't see where we're paying that $70,000. I know that we're not going to have it in revenue, but we're not paying it. So
it's not a payment for us. It's an income that we're losing.
Yes, it's just. I'm just saying that would mean that total operating expenses, if we went to Hamilton County, it's not $986,000. You have to take $70,000 out of that because we're not going to. I know it's an income we're losing, but we're not paying it next year if we were to go to the county dispatch.
This is a cost difference. This is not a cost to us. This is a cost difference between what we pay now and what the money that comes in and the money that goes out. So if income is going to be less, that's the only reason why I included it. It's not money we're paying the county, but if I'm giving you money and you no longer get it, it's a loss to us. So I added it for that reason.
Okay. Well, thank you for the answer.
And at the bottom below the Agile Network, there's 2 increases. When we spoke to the county, we know that costs will go up with the county in the future. We're not exactly sure what that will be. The estimates were between $1 and $2, and it was talked that the estimates may go up as early as the beginning of the year, as the new fiscal year rolls around. So I just included those to show that in the event the county charges right now at $15 a call or an incident, if they go up $1 and make it $16, then we add about $30,000 to that, and so forth with if they go up $2. That's all that is. That's not factored into the difference. It's just listed for notation.
Each $1 increase is a $30,000.
It's probably like 29,000. What was it? 29,400 and some odd dollars, but I just rounded it up for simplicity. It might be it might be around $500 less than that number.
Can I just say one thing? We took these numbers, I took these numbers that they provided and another document they gave me and gave it to April and Anna Mary. So, first thing I did was when we got it from them, signed it, I gave it to them. So, you know, this is all, they're reviewing it all anyway, so to make sure that the state is good with it.
Yes, Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. One, I think, might be a dovetail back to what Mr. Bonsall was asking. I know you said that the auditor provided this one sum as the cost for 17. Was the auditor able to break it out similarly to how it's broken out under Hamilton County?
Yeah, it's quite a number of pages written in a language that I don't understand. If you're an auditor, I'm sure he could explain that. But that was total expenditures for everything under dispatch's domain.
So the breakdown does exist. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, every bill that comes in has to be put through a process, and that it's documented individually. It's not like they just reach in a bucket and pull money out. It's there is a very detailed list that can be provided, I'm sure.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because I think the effort to make this more simple is conflating some numbers, and that is confusing to me to hear. I know you say there's a revenue stream coming in, and this was not designed to show that. So I'm wondering, looks like there's more to this because you referenced some other lines and columns. Is there another page that just is a cost breakdown?
Well, these are basic explanations on the columns that are shown on your paper.
Okay, I don't see an indicator for a column D or a line 22. So can you help me out? What's the?
Well, when you open it up in a spreadsheet program, they're all so A, B, C, D. It's just okay. Let me help you out here. The Hamilton County cost is based on $15 an incident. If it's raised $1 to $2 per incident, those are lines 13 and 14. It's basically the PSEP cost increase of $1, the PSEP cost increase of $2.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
It says these costs will be added to D, which actually is what they would be added to the Hamilton County tally. So if the 986 was their total number, and the cost went up $1, that number would go up by $30,000. So it would be it'd be 1,010,000 some change, 16,000, something like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Let me just say
Does
this.
I'm sorry.
And if you have any more questions,
I do have one.
go ahead.
The change from Cincinnati Bell to a different carrier.
Yes.
Are there costs associated with that?
Yes.
And is that a wash, or is it costing more or less? If you could clarify that. And then I have a follow-up question if you...
Right now, our anti-alley mapping system, our map system that maps our 911 calls, and the 911 system itself runs us a little over $20,000 a year. And that is a maintenance program. That doesn't have anything to do with the equipment. We have the equipment. If we were to switch to digital, that cost would be, there is a cost to purchase the equipment, and then in that, after the first year, there is a service and maintenance cost that is added to that equipment purchase, and we have broken that down over a 7-year period so that that cost is virtually almost the same cost as what we're paying now, but with a little bit of difference. We have a 911 system, we have mapping system that costs $20,000 now. The new 911 system is state-of-the-art, it's tremendously better than what we have. The mapping system that I want to switch to is a far greater, far more superior system, and we added in a text to 911 program to bring us into the younger generation's desires. I think that it's going to be a very positive thing for the community. That is about $3,000 a year till we purchase the equipment, and then the cost will drop. So for 7 years, we're paying about $23,000 a year. Not 23,000, but we added in the text to 911. The text to 911, there's every year, year after year, still plenty of funds left in the 911 funds to cover that cost. So it's virtually considered an even exchange. After that, we own the equipment after 7 years. After the 7 years, we pay off the equipment. Our maintenance costs, right now we're $20,000 in maintenance costs. After 7 years, our maintenance costs would drop to about half that, because we would have purchased the equipment.
And then, thank you, that's very good. I know you gave us that information in a previous committee of the whole meeting, but I think it was important to reiterate that.
Well, I would like to reiterate one thing. We're knocking on September's door. This is not an easy transition, no matter what gets decided here. We need to move on this quickly, or Cincinnati Bell has let us know that if we do not make the deadline, we will pay dearly to keep the system alive just for us.
Don't blame me. And my follow-up then is, I must hate to give this legs, but could you speak to the fact that there was someone who was another community who might want to purchase our 911 system and rent it from us, or some things that were going on out in the community that I don't quite understand?
Yes. Well, I went out and I talked to a bunch of different police chiefs from Hamilton County agencies, but I went out and visited 3 police, and I don't want to give their names because I don't.
It's okay.
But I will say this: nobody was unhappy with the service they got from Hamilton County. That's not an issue. Everybody is a little bit concerned about the price increase, and they mentioned that it's hard to budget when you don't know for sure what your costs are going to be the following year. But the one place that I talked to mentioned that they had talked about if we were to ever give up our PSAP, they would like to possibly look at obtaining that PSAP because they want to be able to control their cost. And they talked about having like a valley, which you probably don't know what the valley are. Some people, a regional dispatch. Them and a couple of the agencies that border them. Now, I don't think regardless they can't. I don't believe if we were to give up ours, nobody's going to get it. It's my understanding. It's gone. Nobody in Hamilton County is going to get another PSAP. But that was some of the concerns that I heard when visiting the other police departments.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
And let me say this one thing, on the purchase of that equipment. I turned that information over to April and Anna Mary. They're going to do the numbers on it. If the number's fat, it's our decision. If they have to go to the planning commission, they'll have to take it to the planning commission. The only thing that has to go to the planning commission, I believe, will report to the planning commission.
Financial planning.
Financial planning commission, whatever.
Big difference.
Yeah. So we'll have to, they'll go to the financial planning commission with the information and make the recommendation. If we don't, if it's not a necessity, then it's something that this council can decide. And they'll make the decision. So, like Mark said, we kind of have to, what took so long? 14 meetings, numbers changing, everybody wanting to get involved in it, and for the chief and the lieutenant to work together and come out with the same numbers and come out with agreement on which direction would be best for this city was the most important part, because as you know, it can get out of hand with information going out that is far from being accurate. So we'll be talking to April and them, and then we'll go from there.
Other questions? Mr. Sanker?
Mark, when do we have to, when Cincinnati Bell getting out of it, what type of time frame for transition from one
Cincinnati Bell throws a switch January 31st.
Okay.
Which, that seems like a decent amount of time, but when you think of the logistics involved in transferring, let alone paying for, doing contracts, but transferring out the equipment, training all the operators on the new equipment, and then backlogging the systems so that they have the access tools that they need in order to function, we are behind the 8 ball. We are way behind schedule in getting this moved forward. No matter which way we go.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Madam President. And you said September.
Can you speak into your microphone?
Thank you. You mentioned September, which just implies that we are that much closer to January when we have to switch. Correct.
We have 5 months.
Yeah.
If we don't switch, we will pay to keep our system up. So the decision has to be made now. We can beat these numbers up again. We did the best estimate we could based on the systems that we have on calculating our numbers. If you go any agency in the county that works with the county, they don't know what their numbers are going to be. Nobody does. It's based on the number of calls for service in your community. There is no doubt in my mind there is a very big reason why agencies who do not have a PSAP would be interested in purchasing our PSAP. Because they know what we're struggling with now, is they know the value of being able to control your own costs.
At the last Financial Planning and Supervision Commission meeting, the mayor briefly brought this up, and one of the members of the commission asked a question that we both kind of shook our heads at, but I'm going to ask you the question, and I think you'll understand. No. The question was asked if we thought that people kind of know that it's a Norwood 911, and so they call for things that maybe if we went to the county they wouldn't call on because it's a county agency. And I know what my personal thoughts are and the mayor's personal thoughts, but I'm just curious what your thoughts were.
Well, that would be an insult to the citizens of Norwood to assume that they're not smart enough to know what the 911 call and what's not. So I would say that's not an issue. What would be an issue is the level of service. I believe the level of service that would be supplied to the citizens of Norwood would be less, because when they call for the police, if a dispatcher doesn't feel that it warrants a police officer's response, we get a supervisor on the police department involved. Our citizens have become accustomed to receiving a level of treatment that has made a name for Norwood. They would not receive that same level of treatment if we switched to the county. The county has policies. We write our own policies. We would follow the county's policies.
Thank you. Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I think it's indicative that three of you came to the same conclusion.
I think we should have it, like, at least, if you don't mind, Madam President.
Mr. Bonsall?
So what is this process now going to look like? I mean, whose authority is it to make the decision? Is it something that we need to approve to say that, yes, let's keep our dispatch? I mean, I'm just curious. I think many citizens at home are curious, too, what this looks like for the next 5 months.
I would like to support a council. I can tell you this, looked at the numbers I'm going to do everything I can to keep it. Period. I've gone what they've said, out talking to other units, finding out the uncertainty of what's going to happen in the county, the level of service that it provides. I've said this 15 times. I live here, and I want the best I can get as far as my responses go. If that's greedy, so be it. But the other issue is the other issue we have to go, if it affects the financial plan, the supervisor, the financial supervisor, does the review. She'll talk to either the lieutenant or the chief, and then if we've got to go to the commission, I've told the commission at the last meeting, we may need a special council meeting here shortly, or a commission meeting, and so we'll do that. But I think everything considered, I think the support of the council is vital. There's no ordinance. You don't need to pass an ordinance to say, to do away with it. You have to pass an ordinance, I guess, to go to the county. I'm not really sure, but I think it's vital that this council come out and support this 911 system, and then we'll take it to the. There was a possibility we could have taken all this to Financial Planning Commission first, but that's a technicality. My opinion was, and I told him that, I believe it should come to the city council first, and then we'll take it to the Financial Planning Commission. If the council wants to reflect now what their support is, we can make that part of the record and take that to the Financial Planning Commission.
Every Financial Planning and Supervision Commission meeting, I give a report from council, and if the mayor calls a special meeting, I would be happy to convey your thoughts on this. My understanding is that if we do decide to maintain our own and we have to purchase equipment, that's new debt, and that has to be approved by the commission. Hence, the mayor told them that if council decided to keep the 911 system, then he's going to ask that a special meeting of the commission be called so that they can review the cost of these and approve
And the way
additional
April
debt.
explained it, if it's just a continuation, they may not have to go.
They may not have to.
But we, Joe Gears and myself both, we don't make a move if there's any question. The idea of keeping the 911 system comes to this council. The question on even though it's not going to cost us but a couple of thousand a year, the idea of doing anything, we go right away to that financial planning supervisor, and they review it and they give us their recommendation. If they say it goes to the Financial Planning Commission, that's where it goes. And we can get that done quickly.
Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Moore?
And the question was, Mr. Bonzo's question, what are the steps we need, what are the hoops we need to jump through to go either way? And I think to stay with what we have, we'll have to do contracts with the new provider relatively soon to replace Cincinnati Bell. We'd have to do contracts, and that would have to
I've
go
already
through
got
the
a
fiscal.
contract
Right.
from them,
Right,
outlining what we'll get, and we went on to the state bid contract. Kentucky State got a state bid contract, which gave us a substantial amount of equipment. Some of this cost that's going into play here is some cost that we don't have now. But when we go to if we go to the new system, we're going to get 3 portable PSAPs, which are basically suitcase PSAPs. So in case our building goes down, we can continue our functionality. Now, that's huge for ensuring the viability of our center. If the telephone systems, if the computer systems go down, the building catches fire, we have the ability to just keep right on going. So there are some things we're getting besides the state-of-the-art equipment. We're getting some more services to provide a better service to our citizens.
Right. But essentially, it's basically the basic contract process.
Already have a contract from them.
But
Yes,
council needs to approve it,
Approve
and
that.
find out fiscal recovery plan. In order to go the other way, there would have to be an agreement with the county of
Be
one kind or
contracts.
another. Right. There'd be contracts that council would have to approve. But I think based on this, since there's no other way, even if you assumed that these numbers are completely off base, these are the only numbers we have at this point. So if we were going to go to the county, I just want to run this past you, Madam President, if we were going to go to the county, or if we were going to switch over, these are the numbers we have, and so the number we would have to take to the Fiscal Oversight Committee would be, we need to increase the cost of 911 by $133,000 for next year.
To go to the county.
In order to switch over, we would have to get the Fiscal supervision committee to approve that. That's the way I would understand
That's the way I read it as well.
And if I could, just on the policy side.
Just a question, if either way we go, do we need an ordinance authorizing that one way or the other? Do we need an ordinance accepting, if we decide to keep the 911, do we need an ordinance authorizing them to enter into the contract? Or if we decide to go with the county, surely we're going to need an ordinance authorizing them to negotiate or enter into a contract with the county for services.
Correct. Council would need to approve a contract for whatever the new provider of the new equipment we're buying, new software, new services. Council would have to approve those, just like they do when we buy radios. So, I mean, that's just normal contracting process for us.
Makes sense.
But we don't need an ordinance that says we're going to keep our 911 system.
It does. I guess just the question is then, does the administration, do you all feel like you have an indication for what council would like to do? I haven't heard a lot of voices even in the past meetings that, really strongly either way, because we didn't have a lot of information, so,
For as long as I've been around and as long as I've been involved in these type of services, I highly recommend it. And let me tell you, my thought in the back was, I ran into the chief a couple of months ago, and he said, what's your feeling on what it would take for us to leave the county? And I said, it would have to cost us a ton of money. He said, what are you thinking? And I said, if I would accept going, keeping our own if it cost us $150,000 to $200,000 a year. I was ready to accept, absolutely, because I believe that system is vital. And as it turns out, it's 100 and some thousand less. And I'll tell you something else. There was one figure that they had, and it was 300 some thousand, and they both said, nah, something wrong. We need to go back and check that. So they went back and checked it again.
These are minimum numbers.
Yeah, and so they decided to go with the minimum numbers it would cost us. So it could cost us more than $130,000 a year, but they went to be on the safe side and more accurate side to lower it down to $130,000. If they came to you and said, well, we're gonna save you $325,000, and if they weren't sure about it, and like the chief said to me, this is an important decision, and we want to make sure, if I'm quoting you wrong, tell me, we want to make sure we get it right. So basically, my feelings were one way. Do it. Whatever you can come up with, do it. And they did. It's as simple as that.
And if I could, I just have another, just to clarify for me personally, if that's all right, Madam President.
Sure.
The cost, like the PSAP calls for service costs, you said that was based on 15,000 calls?
That was like the number. 15,100 and some odd
like
calls.
in that number. And I was just doing.
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're right.
It's 15,100 something police calls and a little over 10,000 fire calls.
Okay.
So, and I got to include the firemen. They're in the back.
Okay.
Love you guys.
Okay.
So that puts us at like.
25,000 calls.
It puts us about 26,000 on the minimum. I wanted to go higher on the police calls. That's why it says down there PSAP call variation. Add another 60,000 to that number because I felt that the police calls would be higher, but we agreed to go with minimum numbers. And so the fire calls are pretty self-explanatory. Their calls are their calls. The police are a little bit more subjective. So we went with the lowest numbers that we could come up with.
And I was just running here and doing this numbers. I mean, if you cut that number by a third,
Just to clarify,
we're still break even. We don't save any money.
Just to clarify, when he says 10,000 police or fire runs, just so somebody said, well, they only had 5,000, they automatically send a police car to every single fire run. So you're double charged, and there's no getting around that. They won't change that for a single agency. Just so people understand that, well, they don't have that many fire runs. Well, we have to double it. So.
Well, these are based off of this year's cost numbers. I don't think there's anyone in the county that I've spoken to, and I know that of the agencies that go to the county for their services, no one will disagree that costs will go up January 1, that the cost will go up next year. We just don't know how much. And that's year after year. Every year they don't know how much because it comes in long after we've already worked on our budgets.
Just to expand on that a little bit, one of the police chiefs I spoke with had just attended the county commissioners meeting, and this was before they took the sales tax off the ballot, or they decided not to do it. And when I talked to him, he said when he left there with the idea that they were going to raise the rates regardless if that sales tax passed or not. So I think they expected a raise even if the sales tax passed, and you would assume it's going to be higher because there is no sales tax.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. So going back to my notes from the May presentation, and I realized back then there was more of a intent to kind of do a state of versus if we went all in and got all the enhancements. I think may have been how we talked about it then. And today's data is a different type of presentation. So I feel really kind of jarred when thinking about the cost comparison in what we're getting. I think you've been very clear. Everyone's been clear. I think the mayor's been clear. I think the police department's been clear in saying we want to maintain service and we want to have some control over cost. And what I'm noticing is that the presentations that I feel like the presentations I've received have painted different comparisons each time. And so I know for me, in terms of discussion and just kind of what I'm thinking, I'd like to make time to come sit with you and kind of walk through what was presented in terms of cost and what we would get in the short term and over time. I understand that there are some upfront costs that would on the back end wash out in terms of maintenance and what have you. But I feel like this is very different from what we were presented before. And I would be helped in thinking through where's the value lie in considering it this way versus before.
Well, what I can answer that is the way when I run the numbers before, I run them off of what I felt would be a good estimate. I did not want to undercut the numbers because I'd rather have a little extra in the bank than not enough. So when we got with the county several more times, we got done, we worked well with the chief. The chief and I agreed that we should go with minimum numbers, to go with what absolutely would be the minimum cost difference if we were to switch. So the numbers are drastically low. And unfortunately, I can't tell you what they would be if we did switch to the county. Depends on how many times the citizens call 911, or they call the police, or they call the fire department. But I can sit here and tell you that my estimation of those numbers are still going to be higher. But these are minimum numbers.
Just as a point of clarity, my concern is less about what the numbers actually are and rather more about the actual improvements in terms of the equipment versus service. I hear you saying there's a variable we don't control, but going with a city-funded, managed approach, there's more we can control. And what I'm not hearing is what do we get when we control?
Well, I think the mayor had touched on it a bit. There are some things we can do to further cut our costs, to further induce more savings for the city or for the communications center. Those are things that we're eagerly hoping to get to work with the county on. There are, I don't believe that from the first meeting to this meeting, the equipment changes. The equipment's always been the same. We go to the county, we get their service. If we go with the PSAP program that we selected, and we selected it for two reasons: which was better and which was cheaper. My two favorite reasons. The system we selected was better than the alternative, and it is also drastically cheaper than the alternative. So I don't really understand what your question is. If you understand that the first estimates were what I perceived to be the cost would be on a more of a realistic or even a little bit of a higher end versus the bare minimum costs, that's how the financial figures panned out. Mine was an estimation like it won't be more than this, and it's not going to be any less than this. as far as equipment goes, there's equipment we have to buy. But there's equipment that the cost that we're paying for equipment now is we're going to use that money to pay for the new equipment. So it's not a wash, but it's virtually the same thing.
I guess what I'm respectfully requesting council to do is pass a motion of support to keep 911 tonight, so we can move forward, so we can get a hold of and have the conversation with April and Anna Mary, our financial planning supervisors, and get together and get a financial planning commission meeting scheduled and get it to them. That's what I'm asking for. There's a motion from support, so Donna can report that to the commission, and we can have a discussion with them, because they've been provided all this, and they've also been provided the information on the equipment. So I guess that's what I'm asking you for, is a motion or a vote to support keeping our 911.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. And actually, I mean, I would agree. If the council wants to move that direction, I'd like to potentially see some motion today too, so that they can do what they have to do to keep going forward. So when we look at like the actual cost of our current dispatch today, so we have the numbers $853,000 that was spent last year. $779,000 of that was personnel costs. There was
what?
Personnel. There was $2,000 or $3,000 in contractual, $98 in materials, and then there was a debt service of $70,000. And just a quick question before I make my point there: the debt service $70,000. What does that relate to out of the dispatch key?
I'm assuming it's probably either the mark system. I think we pay for the mark system.
That's the contract.
Yeah.
So the mark system is the actual the boards that we have that we're using to dispatch. I mean, or at least
it's just a link. It's a back office or back server room link from the radio system to the cell phone systems.
Okay, and then there's also the wireless fund that we spent $80,000 last year, but that's not classified as what it is.
The 911 fund?
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't spend $80,000 last year. We were allotted $80,000 last year. We didn't spend all of that.
Well, I mean, according to the...
And some of those funds were pulled for payroll, so technically that would have... They were pulled to use other things.
Okay, either way, the point I'm trying to make is that it's... Our primary expenses in there are personnel expenses. If it looks like this could be the best way to go is to keep our own. I mean, there's a lot of risks into not keeping our own. But if we do move that direction, we're going, and somebody decides to change later. Let's just say there's another mayor that gets elected and they want to change it later. And most of our expenses are personnel. It's not like we're signing contracts to lock us into $800,000 for the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, there's very little. I guess what you said is, it's not that much of it that's actual equipment. And I would think some of those leases we could probably break if we had to. I might be wrong about that, but and they would just take our equipment back. So, I guess to me, there's still a few questions about just one of the numbers, but even with that question about that one number, it still looks like it makes more sense to stick with the Norwood dispatch. So, I would support, somebody made a motion, I would probably support that motion to at least give them direction that we would move forward with keeping our own dispatch.
Did you make that motion?
No.
Okay. Mr. Sanker.
Madam President, I'll make the motion that we'll go on record as saying that I believe we should maintain our 911 service as is for now, based upon the rough numbers here that if worse, it's going to be a wash. Even if we're into it for the county for an extra $130,000, or not even if it's a break even, I feel we're better off maintaining the service here and having our own control over it at this point in time than relinquishing it. Because as stated, once you do relinquish it, you'll never get it back. And there are people out there that would love to have what we have right now. So.
Second by Mrs. Hanrahan. I'm sorry, she had her hand up before. Any discussion? Mr. Clark.
I just want to thank Lieutenant Rankin, Chief Kramer, and Mayor Williams for working on this and putting all this information together. I too agree that I think the level of service that we have is just invaluable to get rid of, and I think if this is worst case scenario, I think we're going to be in good shape. So I think it just makes sense. So thank you guys for taking all the time and effort you put into this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mrs. Hanrahan,
Thank you, Madam President.
can you speak into your microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say, yes, I absolutely agree we need to keep 911 for many reasons. One, I want to make sure we keep the city independent, and that's one way to do it. The level of service here is incredible, and yeah, thank you for coming and explaining all of this.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanrahan. Any other discussion? Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. I too want to appreciate the efforts to provide us with information. Just referencing the questions asked before and really wanting to sit with you and kind of talk through what's changed as we've gotten information. I plan to abstain when we do vote on this motion.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Is there any other discussion? The motion on the floor then is to express council's desire to keep the 911 system in-house. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Abstain.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Senker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Absolutely, yes.
I vote of 5 in favor and 1 abstention. The motion passes. Gentlemen, I think you have your direction.
Ms. Stevenson would like to meet with us. Want her to us, just call the office.
Thank you.
And one last thing. I mentioned on the first meeting, anytime any council member wants to take a tour of dispatch and learn more about the communication center, my door is always open. So just give me a call and I'd be happy to give you a tour of the center.
Thank you. I know you had a celebration going on too, and I thank you for coming over here.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. We do have one request to address council. Amy Wolfenbarger. If you'll give us your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes to address council.
Hi, Amy Wolfenbarger, 5406 Carthage Avenue. I'm the founder of Sensible Norwood. I wanted to check back. Last time we talked, I had left a copy with my initiative for everyone's reading pleasure. So I wanted to come back, see if anybody had any questions maybe that I could answer on that. I also, Monday, we were approved by Hamilton County Board of Elections, our final confirmation for ballot placement. We will most definitely be on November's ballot this coming November. I know that things have been crazy this past week. There's been a lot of media around since we got confirmed for ballot. I would like to clear up some of that. I have reached out and spoken with Chief Kramer as well, let him know that I am available. We talked a little bit. I just want to say that last thing I want is to be enemies in this. I would like to start off by saying we the people of the United States of America, as well as we the people of the state of Ohio. Citizens' initiative is a form of direct democracy. It is our right as citizens to petition our government. It is our right to have initiatives placed on ballots. And it is our right to have laws enacted if the majority vote the laws in. Challenging our law is certainly legal to do, and is something that should be decided in the court should Norwood decide that this is a law that they do not want to enact. I hope that we don't have to come to any sort of court challenge. I will say that there are 6 cities in the state of Ohio that have this law in effect currently. Toledo passed this law 2015. The law was contested. It went to the Ohio Supreme Court. The felony portion of the law, which kept me off the ballot in 2016, was found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. However, the misdemeanor portion of the law was allowed to go into effect by the Ohio Supreme Court. In 2016, 4 other cities followed. That's also the year that I made the attempt and was kept off ballot. In 2016, we have Newark, Logan, Roseville, and Bel Air, all in the state of Ohio, passed this same law. These laws are currently in place in all of these cities. Then we have one more city to follow in 2017, which was Athens, Ohio. The law is currently in effect in Athens, Ohio, and it is also being respected there too. The things that we have found in these cities where these laws have gone into effect is that crime has not increased. Every drug dealer in the county did not move to these cities. The world has not ended. The sky did not fall. We expect the same thing to happen here. The world is not going to end. The sky is not going to fall. We are simply asking to remove fines and penalties for cannabis-only possession. This does not mean that you are allowed to drive while intoxicated. If you drive while intoxicated, you are breaking the law. That is a crime, and you will be prosecuted as such. If there's a firearm in the car, if there are felony amounts of cannabis in the car, those are crimes, and citizens will be prosecuted as such. I am a patient. I am not a criminal, and I do not like to be treated as such. So again, I hope everyone had an opportunity to read over my language. If there's any questions, I'm always available. I want to keep an open dialogue with the city. I want to keep an open dialogue with the police, and I would like to see this go as smoothly as possible. So I thank you all again for your time tonight.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We did receive a copy of that in there.
Is you're just a private citizen, you're not a lobbyist or represent any organization?
No, sir. I've worked in statewide cannabis reform for many, many years because, as I said, many of us are patients. We're not criminals. We have worked our fingers to the bone, and we have gotten virtually nowhere. There is a medical bill right now. It's not a good one. It will not help many patients within the state. It will not be affordable. I am a private citizen, lived in Norwood for over 20 years. I do not get paid to do what I do, and I am not a lobbyist. I just added a small part to the Norwood ordinance, and as a citizen went out on the streets, worked really, really hard to bring this to ballot now for the second time.
So can you tell me, I know that you're looking at taking away the penalty, so we have a law against it, but there will be no penalty for it. Am I correct? Is that?
That's correct. As citizens doing initiative in Ohio, we have to remain within Ohio law, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm not a lawyer. Let me stress that as well. So we cannot change laws. We cannot write new laws, but we can change fines and penalties on existing laws. So just as City Council tonight could vote to increase or decrease a speeding ticket, citizens and councils can also vote to raise or lower fines for cannabis possession. So it will still be illegal. There will be no financial benefit to the city to continue to prosecute if the law goes into effect. And I got to tell you, I walked over here tonight. There's a lot more in our city that we need to be concerned about than just simple cannabis possession.
So this is the medical marijuana that can be used. This is a totally different thing, and your belief is that the medical marijuana law is not adequate. Am I right to say that?
It is not, and as a citizen, we have all went to many task force meetings. Tried to get House Bill 523 into a more workable law. Medication under House Bill 523 is not going to be affordable for most patients. I'm not going to be able to afford that. Doctors will not be accepting health insurance for your marijuana appointment. That can be costly within itself. Some doctors are requiring that you return to them every 90 days to continue your recommendation. And we don't even have the medication yet, so, there is no telling what that is going to cost in addition to doctor's appointments as well.
So you want to take away, so I understand this right, you want to take away the ability for somebody, if they're charged, there's no penalty for it.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. There's no financial punishment. Not all punishment has to be financial. If officers choose to issue a citation, you will still be guilty of misdemeanor drug possession, or drug abuse, I think is how they term it, and it will go on your record. And I will say, as a 50-year-old woman, I have a misdemeanor drug abuse on my criminal history from 1998. Today, it still affects me in getting employment. A student getting caught with just a marijuana cigarette could lose their student aid funding. And then again, it'll go on your criminal history, affecting you for the rest of your life. And as I said before, I am not a criminal. Many of us are not criminals. Do criminals use cannabis? Unfortunately, they do. Criminals abuse other laws as well. So to remove just the fine in today's society, like I said, we're actually hoping that our city will do what other cities have done and look the other way when it comes to misdemeanor amounts of cannabis possession. Like I said, I walked over here tonight. I passed 3 people, and this is not an exaggeration, from Carthage to here, that could barely walk. Heroin. It's very apparent. Our roads are horrible. Our city has garbage all over the place. There's a significant amount of theft that occurs here, which coincidentally goes hand in hand with heroin addiction. Cannabis-only consumers are not criminals.
So they can legally buy it. I mean, there's no fine for it. So, in other words, so I guess if there's no fine for it, then they'll be out purchasing a lot of it from people who shouldn't be selling it, which I guess is a natural occurrence.
Well, I mean, I guess that could be your personal opinion, but I will say now that there is a huge black market that already exists. I mean, patients have been purchasing their cannabis, I guess if you want to say on the streets for years, which just brings a whole nother issue as to, why legalization should just occur. Because essentially what you're doing then is you're driving patients into the actual arms of drug dealers, people that have heroin at their homes, people that have opiate pills at their homes, people that have cocaine laced with fentanyl at their homes. I mean, let's be real here. There are way bigger issues in the city of Norwood than misdemeanor cannabis possession. Legalization's coming. Like I said, the sky's not going to fall. This could be a really good way to kind of dip our toes into the legal market that is headed our way.
I agree. Now, can I ask one more question of the law department? If there's no penalty, then there's no crime. Am I right? Is that the old adage?
There is case law in Ohio that if there is no penalty attached to the crime, then the crime is a nullity. The statute, the ordinance is a nullity and essentially deleted out of the books. That's kind of old. It's been a long time since the case has come up again. How this if the state is going to bring a challenge, I mean, if it's passed, then the law department has to defend it if it's challenged, but whether the Attorney General or the county is going to file suit to try to have this nullified, basically have the ordinance nullified, I don't know.
Any other questions or comments?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor, for your questions. I really appreciate that. Have a great night.
We'll move on to unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. In our last regular meeting, we received a memo regarding an application for its CRA tax exemption referencing Ordinance 18, 2009. That was provided to members of council, and the topic was referred to the Economic Development Community Engagement Committee per that Ordinance 18 of 2009. When I read through this, Section 11 references a tax incentive review council shall be established pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 5709.85, and shall consist of 3 representatives appointed by the Board of County Commissioners for Hamilton County, Ohio, 2 representatives of the City of Norwood, Ohio, appointed by the mayor with council concurrence, the Hamilton County Auditor or designee, and a representative of each affected boards of education. I'm not aware of who this group is, and I wanted to try and get some clarity around that before this comes up in our committee. So I'd like to ask that we have a letter sent through Clerk of Council, and I'm not even really sure where it needs to go based on reading this. There's not a point person identified in this ordinance for the commercial real estate part of the program, so I'm looking for some guidance on how do we know who else needs to be involved in the review of the request?
The Tax Incentive Review Council is an organization that meets a minimum of once a year to review all tax incentive agreements. I served on that committee as the county representative for probably 15 years. There is someone else who is a county representative now. 3 other people. Our 2 people that are appointed that represent Norwood, as I recall, are Ms. John Hanrahan and Andy Conlon. Is that correct, Mary?
I think we changed Andy. We replaced him, I think, with Mike, because Andy's clerk.
Oh, Andy's clerk.
So we replaced him.
Okay. So they...
Who is the other person? Mr. Hanrahan and who else?
I think Mike Conlon.
Mike Conlon?
They might have put Mike on it, yeah.
And Andy Conlon used to be the representative, but when he became the clerk of courts, he was replaced. And so they review those annually at a meeting that's called, used to be held at the Hamilton County Development Corporation. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. But literally, Norwood representatives would be called to review the tax incentives that are given out when the Norwood portion is being reviewed. In other words, they review the whole county on that day. Reports have to be filed with the county, and then the county sends those reports out to the members of the commission for their review prior to the meeting, and then they have to say, yes, the people are in compliance, general compliance with the terms of the tax incentive or not. There have been instances where they were not, where the county they reduced the amount of the, say for instance, you got a 75% tax abatement. If they were not in compliance, usually the committee would say, we're going to cut you back to 50% until you meet the terms of your agreement or whatever. And so the person who has gotten the tax incentive must provide proof that they have met the terms of that agreement each year at this meeting. So those appointments are made by the mayor, but they were approved by council. They come to council for approval. So if it's less than, if it's less than 50%, then they don't have to get approval from the Board of Education.
If it's over, they got it.
If it's over 50%, then they have to get the approval of the Board of Education. Yes.
A couple of follow-up questions. So is it Mr. Hanrahan or Mr. Conlon who would have the 17 annual, I don't know if they call it a report or not?
The reports are sent to the county.
Okay, so who would we contact if we wanted to see a copy of it? The person at the county?
It's the development office, isn't that?
Yeah, down ACDC.
My guess is that it comes through the auditor's office. The Hamilton County Auditor's Office is where, and then it also gets filed with the Development Office, Hamilton County Development Office. same office where we get our community development block grant funds. So that office is the one who holds the meetings, but it's the county auditors who report on the amount of taxes that are paid or not paid or whatever. So I think if you have questions, you may want to go to the development office.
Thank you.
It's a pretty lengthy report that each of the recipients have to fill out every year. They get it usually in January or so, and then they have a month or so to fill it out. They don't meet the deadlines, they're in deep trouble, so there's a lot that goes into getting a tax incentive. Any other unfinished business? Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to remind everybody of the UC Mobile Health mammography van will be at the Community Center Wednesday, September 9th. And it's not just for seniors. The number to call is 584-PINK. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Ms. Stevenson.
I did just have one more question as it related to my previous topic. Section 13 talks about the Community Reinvestment Area Program. This ordinance was provided to us and it does document the program. I did reach out to the law department just to get clarity, but it looks like we have forms with the Ohio Department of Development that would describe our program as well. When I read this, does a letter need to go from council, the office, to get more information about what our program entails?
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Madam President. As far as I know, the ordinance is the program. The ordinance and the forms that are provided to applicants, that really is the summary. This describes the program.
You were on council when this was created?
I was, yes. I went back and forth went back and forth for a year trying to get language that everybody could agree on, yes.
Right. That's why I deferred to you. I thank you for that.
I just wanted to say thank you. That's very helpful before this gets to committee to know what are the parameters and the previously established program that we need to consider.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Any new business? Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we all know about the bird scooters, which is already an issue in Norwood. I also have just learned that Xavier is going to have Lime bikes, I don't know what it's, Lime bikes and scooters. Same thing, but with bicycles and scooters. So they're planning on having them come to Xavier. So we're also going to have bikes that do the same thing as the scooters.
Electric bikes?
Well, they're not electric bikes, but you have to rent them. I believe that's it. I have had calls about these already. I know they're new and they're out there, and I don't have an opinion on them one way or another till we see what happens. But they're being left in people's yards. I have pictures where these scooters are just dropped on Montgomery Road. So it's something that all the cities have to address. And I am asking that we put this into my Housing, Health, and Safety Committee, just so we can look at it and be prepared for, whatever's going to happen with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanrahan. Have at it. That's a big one. That's going to be a big one. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. So I would, I was definitely going to talk about the bird scooters as well, and I'm curious. So I guess I'm really curious to see the picture of it left in Montgomery. Is it on the street, or do you?
You want to see a picture of it?
But on the street, or you mean on the sidewalk?
Across the sidewalk, so people couldn't walk on the sidewalk.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Feel free to share. So I guess I just want to make sure that whatever we do as a city, that we look to other cities' best practices to determine or at least to guide how we move forward here. I think we're going to see, I agree that I do think that we're going to see other dockless mobility, I guess, devices, or companies try to use these in the future. Whereas like currently Red Bike today, they have all these different docking stations that are like spread around downtown and uptown and over the Rhine. And I think they might be coming to Kennedy Heights or Bond. I remember hearing that Red Bike was going to extend to somewhere nearby, but not to Norwood or Xavier. But I think that we've got to make sure that, and so with those, these new ones don't have the docks, so they can be left, in various places. But I think though I just want to make sure that we look at, I guess, quality of life in the city, and yes, are they kind of annoying to some people just that aren't comfortable and aren't used to the new things around? They probably are, but I think that there's probably can be some reasonable regulations that can get placed on them, including taxing them. Some cities have done $1 per scooter placed per day. Some have done 50 cents. I mean, whatever that number might be, but it could be a way that we could look to improve our sidewalk infrastructure if we're very concerned about how pedestrians get around. So, in which I think we should be. So I just would look forward to hearing how this develops in the Housing Committee. I'd love to chat further about it just in the future. And I just hope that when we do consider something that we just make sure that we take into account that not everybody has a car, not everybody can get around, and do we really wouldn't it be nice if some of these scooters were going down the street instead of people driving half-ton vehicles that were going down the street? So just things to think about, and I look forward again to hearing more about what the Housing Committee does with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Hanahan?
Thank you, Madam President, and if I could just respond. I have already sent emails out to several cities who have the laws and are charging fees for these, and I hope to look at that. Like I said, I don't have an opinion one way or another about them. They're here. I see the advantage of them, but I also see the nuisance that can be caused by them. So yes, I'll be more than happy to let you know what we talk about in committee.
Thank you, Ms. Hanahan. Any other new business? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Madam President. As we all know, our young people is back to school, and I just want to raise some awareness. This morning I had a meeting with Mr. Yates.
Can you speak into your microphone again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. So this morning I had a meeting with Mr. Lynn Yates, principal of Norwood View Elementary, and attended that meeting was Miss Gregg, secretary in that office. Also spoke to the custodian, Steve Sherry, lunchroom attendant, Ruth Murphy, and Miss Rachel, and Secretary Annette Bryant. And through that meeting, I wanted to discuss traffic safety around Norwood View. And there's been some discussion about unsafe behavior. I think the main thing that the school has an issue with is there's a bus that has disabled children.
Again, pull it closer to your mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've never had a problem with people listening to me, sorry, hearing me. So yeah, through the meeting we discussed traffic safety issues around Norwood View, and the main concern is there is a bus that drops off disabled children, and the concern is that there's a bottleneck on Hannaford Avenue, and so we also discussed Hannaford. We discussed Drex and Carthage Avenue, and what could be done as far as safety around the school, and a lot of things came from that, so I just want to raise awareness to the community, and as you're going in and out, dropping your kids off and picking them up, that we have to be vigilant and being careful, knowing that those are narrow streets. What's our solutions to that problem? A lot of things we discussed. One ways, I understand that some of these are impossible, and we don't know what we can do. One ways on Drex and Hannaford, westbound and eastbound, flashing yellow lights on Carthage Avenue that there are none. That's a possibility, maybe when you're coming down Carthage. People parking in front of their driveways. These are things that happen when people drop their children off. So what do we do about it? in the immediate future, it looks like the painting around maybe our school, our painting on the streets. And now this comes on the same day as I hear, maybe you can help me with this, Ms. Lake, that our Safer grant.
Safe routes to school.
Thank you. So I heard that announcement today, and I'm really excited about that. I don't know if this involves that or not. Maybe you can help me with that.
At the last council meeting, I gave a report, an update on that. I can tell you that at the farmers market on Saturday, there were engineers out looking at Williams Avenue. So they are doing the engineering studies of exactly where these things are going to be placed. And I'm sure there are things that are going to happen around Norwood View. There are new pedestrian walk and don't walk signs that will be installed there. I believe there are flashing lights. There's a flashing light, I'm not certain of that, on Carthage Avenue, but I know for certain that there are new pedestrian walk and don't walk signs that are not only just the countdowns, but also the audible beeps for kids who may be visually impaired. In the past, Chief Kramer has looked at the situation around all of the schools. Every single school complains about kids being dropped off. He had some out-of-the-box ideas last year that he shared with me that I'll just keep quiet because I don't know if they're doable or not, and I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. But you may want to, and I'll be happy to approach him with it, to have him approach you to see if he looked at some of those out-of-the-box ideas about dropping kids off at school.
Thank you. I personally don't have any problem opening my mouth. So let me go ahead and just say what came out of the meeting. We discussed parking for teachers, maybe widening the parking lot a little bit. I don't know exactly how much this is feasible or not. This just came out of the meeting we had. We talked about a wraparound on Hannaford, on Carthage, maybe a wraparound to there's a wish list, of course, a roundabout in front of the school, Hannaford and Carthage. That might be something that we can look into. I mainly wanted to bring awareness to this. Is it feasible to like maybe new paint on our crossways and our school signs that are approaching the school?
And all those will be done in the Safe Routes to School for sure.
Okay.
They're not only just the two stripes for crosswalks, but they're the ladder kind, so it will be clearly marked where crosswalks are, and there'll be signage.
Okay, thank you. So
that is all part of that Safe Routes to School.
Thank you so much. Very excited about that. So it's a little premature for me to ask for maybe a letter to Mr. Gears or Mr. Tepe asking for fresh paint. It's a little premature for that. We're going to wait on our Safe
I know
Routes.
they're out painting now. I saw them painting.
This is the time of year, September, that they start painting the
Perfect.
crosswalk due to the dry
Thank you.
weather.
Thank you.
But I look for those improvements. They're going to be finished with that Safe Route to School by the end of October, and so you're going to see some things. I know for certain that those pedestrian heads are there, and the crosswalk, the ladder type, all those things are going to be done, and signage and all that will be around View.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm excited about that. I just want to thank Mr. Yates for my meeting this morning and everybody else attending that.
It's a concern. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
And parents double park in the street and send their kids across the street.
That's where the problems.
Yeah.
I understand. We got that in all the schools.
My kids are 40 years old, and complaining happened 35 years ago, and it's pretty much the same, unfortunately. So when I was a kid, we walked to school. But I'll hook up with Chief Kramer again, because we talked about some pretty bizarre things that maybe might work.
Thanks.
So I will hook up with him again and see if we can discuss that.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other new business? Mr. Bonso? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Stevenson. You already had one on new business. Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, I asked that copies be made available to council, and I think they were shared with the administration too, of some demographic, housing, and economic security data. So at our Economic Development and Community Engagement Committee meeting earlier this month, the Community Building Institute came and shared that they would be doing some collecting of data, analyzing some information on behalf of the action groups that will be furthering the quality of life visioning planning process. Those action groups actually meet for the first time tomorrow evening 7 to 9 p.m. over at Norwood High School. You're welcome to join them. Anyone is welcome to join in. Topics are going to be ranging from housing, infrastructure, community engagement, community perception, and a couple others as well. This data is being provided to those groups and to council to aid in decision making. So when we think about, do we want to bring more activities to parks, for instance, we now have at our fingertips what is the most recent census data. You know, our population for under 18 is 3,600 in our city. And so I'm sharing this out with council for your use in committees, for our use, and even thinking about some of the opportunities ahead of us. There is a whole packet on housing market indicators. There's some information in here about housing value. There's information in here about housing stock in terms of when properties were built and how many. And there's also a packet on economic security. So this looks at how much are households earning and how does that compare to our surrounding city of Cincinnati, as well as the county are the other municipalities of comparison. Some very interesting things in here, one in which really talks about the cost burden of housing. And so I just want to encourage council to be aware. This is information that is being shared broadly and is available to us. CBI did share before that this is information they're willing to come present on. They weren't able to be here tonight, but they're also willing to assist council as well as the action groups and other data points as well. So I just wanted to make sure we got that into your hands. It was available just beginning this week.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Place Matters. There's a program called Place Matters, and it has very similar information. So where you live matters, for sure. Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. So one issue that's kind of been brought to my attention, and I've traveled this for a while, but the steps between Lower and Upper Millcrest Park, the steps between Lower and Upper Millcrest Park are in pretty deplorable condition right now. And frankly, I think if an engineer went and looked at it, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but they're leaning in a way that I think they could collapse on people at some point if they continue to further deteriorate. And so I just wanted to refer, I guess, that issue to the Parks, Streets, and Infrastructure Committee, just to see if they can, maybe provide a recommendation on, whether they should be rebuilt. I personally think they should, when the time comes and not just torn out, and to try to understand what cost it would take to rebuild them. So I'd love to hear from the Parks Committee just to see what their vision is on that, and maybe to help Finance Committee kind of go forward on what maybe we should do in the future with it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Any other new business? Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. Xavier's back in school. Kids are out. There's something, there's a new thing going on, and now we have bars that have shuttles coming to pick the kids up to go to Mount Adams and downtown. Thursday night, I was driving around, and about 120 kids in a yard. Later, 11 o'clock at night, the shuttle comes to pick them up. I spoke to the bar that I tracked down of where they were coming from, and they promised they would not pick them up in residential areas anymore. However, they also told me that there are many bars doing this, and I think, I think we all ought to keep our eyes out and open for this. Let me know. I'll call the bars. I have no problem. But 11 o'clock at night, when residents have to get up and go to sleep in the morning, it was a Thursday night, is just ridiculous. And then the kids were screaming in the bus the whole way after they were packed. And along with that, with Xavier, I just want to remind everybody to go ride with the police. I rode with the police again Friday night. You hear what the police do, but if you don't get out there and you're not sitting in the cars with them, you really don't know. So it's really good to go meet with them, drive around and watch and see what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanrahan. Any other new business? Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. This past week, I was able to participate in a workshop with the national team of LISC. They are the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We have an office here in Cincinnati. Their headquarters is in Chicago, and they came together to talk about opportunity zones. Opportunity zones have been established in several states and territories recently. This is it's a tax instrument for investment in low-income census tracts, and the federal government asks states to identify zones, opportunity zones. The state of Ohio has identified southwest Norwood as an opportunity zone, and so I have shared out with the Economic Development and Community Engagement Committee, as well as the Finance, Budget, and Audit Committee, some information about what this means. I would like to recommend that we consider a joint committee meeting to ask LISC or another potential opportunity fund to come create some awareness about this. I got an email today that identifies a little bit more the area, and so I've forwarded that information to Mr. Moore so he could have it as well. But essentially, there's a time frame in which this is not the local community reinvestment opportunity, but there's a time frame in which there are federal opportunities to invest, and our part of the city that will be of interest to investors will probably be getting more attention. So I'd like for us to be aware of what is the tool, who is it likely to attract, because as I understand it from LISC, we as a municipality would be best able to leverage any type of, it has to be equity, so it has to be a real estate project coming to our area. We really need to be able to identify shovel-ready projects that we would want to approve. We would still have to approve them, but it is it's a new opportunity where we might see more private investment is the trend that they're anticipating. It's not really a tool that many banks have in place, although PNC was at this meeting and they are one bank in particular that does have a structure in place. So I'd like to recommend we have a joint meeting so we can gain some more understanding, but also potentially begin to brainstorm how we might want to anticipate responding.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Any other new business? We'll move on to communications. The first is a CVS liquor transfer. This was an email that was sent to the mayor, myself, and the law director, Keith Moore.
Dear Mayor Williams, Council President Lake, and Law Director Moore, I am an attorney in Columbus who practices alcohol beverage law. I represent CVS and their location at 5229 Montgomery Road, Norwood. I am reaching out to you in regards to their efforts to transfer a liquor permit into Norwood for economic development purposes. Currently, there are no liquor permits available in order for CVS to sell beer, C1 liquor permit, for off-premise consumption. As there are no permits available in Norwood for off-premise beer sales, CVS is asking to transfer in a C1 liquor permit and must have the city's approval to do so. This is the same process the city approved for BW3s in 2000, Cancun Restaurant in 2015, First Watch in 2014, Gene Bob's LLC in 2016, Ambiance Nail Spa in 2016, Norwood Sunoco in 2015, Pub at Rookwood Views in 2004, and Whole Foods in 2010. In order to maintain a liquor permit, we must transfer a permit from another location, as there is no available beer permits for off-premise sales in Norwood. The Ohio General Assembly, aware of the difficulty in locating permits to transfer, amended the law in 2012 to make it easier for businesses to locate and transfer alcohol beverage permits to economic development projects such as the one proposed by CVS. The change of law is in Division B, 2BI of Revised Code 4303.29, and the amendment eliminated the restriction for an economic development transfer that the permit to be transferred must be from a municipal corporation that has exceeded its quota restriction. As of March 22nd, 2012, a permit may be transferred from any city or township, regardless of the quota, to a city or township where no additional permits may be issued pursuant to the requirements of an economic development transfer. I have done numerous transfers like this one, and CVS qualifies as an economic development project under the statute. Pertinent details of the economic benefit are included in the attached form highlighting the investment, jobs, and taxes for this location. However, the transfer of the C1 permit may occur only if CVS notifies Norwood regarding the transfer and the city acknowledges in writing to Ohio Division of Liquor Control the transfer. I have attached the Economic Development transfer form, which has been completed and signed by CVS. This form is from the Division of Liquor Control and serves as the city acknowledging the transfer and approving the transfer. Simply signing and returning the form to me is sufficient to serve as the city's acknowledgement. This acknowledgement by would not prohibit the city from requesting a hearing under section 4303.26 of the revised code. I realize this is a lot of information. I am happy to discuss this matter further with either any of you or any members of council. If you need any additional information, please do not hesitate to let me know. I look forward to discussing this matter with you. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Jacob C. Evans.
As a matter of information, I contacted Mr. Evans. I got this over the weekend. I did speak. I called their office, and he was out of town, but I did speak to his assistant. As I was told, there's no expansion. This is a CVS. Mr. Jacob is an attorney who represents CVS in Ohio. Even with the 2 licenses that are in safekeeping, neither of those are for off-premises consumption. So what they are needing is not for anyone to drink alcohol on premises, but to purchase it and take it home. Currently, CVS sells wine. I confirmed that with the store. When that particular store, and previously that particular store had been, I think, a Revco, and when CVS purchased it, they had the license to sell wine. And what they want to do is, there's another CVS in Ohio who is now part of the community entertainment district that no longer needs their license to sell off premises, and so they want to move it in here. There's no additional employees, there's no expansion. It is simply to keep the store afloat so that they sell beer. That's their quest. So I'll give you that as background information for me speaking to that office today. Mrs. Hanrahan. Oh, sorry, you had your hand up.
I'm sorry.
No? Mayor?
I answered him back, and I didn't want to eat up a lot of paper. I just wrote him back and said, no way. Here's my problem. This guy is just like, Columbus is infested with liquor attorneys.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Columbus is infested with liquor attorneys. They're all up there, and they all represent places from all over. And it's sort of a stretch for me to say that that's an economic development. CVS has been there for years. Nice store, nice business. My problem is, if that's an economic development, where does it stop? What else can become an economic development that's a business that's been there 10 years or 15 years? How do you draw the line? If this council says it's okay for CVS, what if somebody else comes in and says, I got a little business down there, I've been there for 20 years, now I want to sell beer to go? Well, I'm an economic development. Well, you've been there for 20 years. To me, that's not economic development. Now, if I'm wrong, fine, but my problem is it opens the door for more people to come in and proclaim that they're, economic development. That's my issue.
On your desk is a copy of all of the things that went back and forth between myself and Mr. Moore, and I guess you're not in this. See yours in here, Mayor.
I can understand that.
You must have done a different one.
His response is in here.
But Mr. Moore asked several questions. You want to speak on this, Mr. Moore? And then his response. So I gave, while the only thing that was read was the original email, you have a packet of information that went back and forth.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So the tax transfer is designed to stimulate economic development. So I was wondering, well, CVS have been there forever, so I don't know, are they doing a build out? Are they rehabbing? What do they do? So I sent them some questions along the lines of, are you doing a rehab? Are you rebuilding it? Are you doing something else? Some questions about what are the tax revenues going to be, because what they sent us is none of it goes to Norwood. It's all state taxes, which doesn't help us at all. Basically questions like that, and he came back and said that we're not doing anything. We're not changing anything. We're not adding any new employees. And actually the kicker, I love this, the creation of one new sale, thus creating any sales tax, is all that is required in order to be for economic development purposes. Like, to me, that's insane and is clearly not in compliance with the statute. So I don't think they're eligible.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. So I talked to the General Counsel today of the Ohio Department of Liquor Control, and it was not about this, it was about the other tax transfer. And I was asking him basically, like, what is an economic development project, and what defines that? And he basically said that it is not defined, like there's nothing like set in stone about what defines it, and that each city has to kind of like make it up on their own what they want to define it. He said for a village of 1,000 people, one new job might be considered an economic development project. For the city of Cincinnati, the bar might be higher. But he said when a city signs off and says that it is an economic development project, they're not really in the position to go and say, oh, well, it's not, it is or it isn't. I mean, they're not going to deny it because, oh yeah, that doesn't create enough. I would be curious if the part of the reason why CVS is wanting this right now is potentially that their store is not performing as well as maybe they would need it to be. And I would worry that, or I would really want to learn more from CVS. I mean, we hear from their attorney. I'd really want to hear more from the actual applicant. Is there any potential issue or potential closure of the store that could be on the horizon? Because, right now in North Norwood, I guess, north of the Lateral, I mean, there's quite a few people that walk to that to get bread or milk, or that may not have a car. I mean, in the data that we just got from Ms. Stevenson, I think it said 12 or 13% of Norwood households don't have access to a personal vehicle. And with the pharmacy there too, many people have to go to specific pharmacies to get their drugs. I was talking to Ms. Lake about this earlier today. And, if there's people that can go there to that CVS pharmacy now, then in the future they would have to go out to, somewhere, I don't even know where the next CVS pharmacy is. I think it's a concern, a quality of life concern for residents. So, I really don't want to say a blanket no, Mr. Mayor. Just, I'd like to learn more about what their goal is with it, about, are there actually any concerns with the store now? I mean, I wouldn't want to do anything that would, that would cause the store or help contribute to the store potentially closing in the future. I think that we all know that there's not going to be another pharmacy that's going to open up in that location if that pharmacy closes. So just something to consider. If it were just a Cappy's carry-out store right there, I wouldn't be as concerned, but just the fact that it does have so many other benefits to the community nearby, it's just something that I personally believe that we should, if we're not going to approve it, to look into.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate Mr. Bonsall's comments. I too was trying to imagine, is this about to be a deal breaker? Are we going to end up with another vacant building? And so I would just concur with it would be great to hear from their counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. With your pleasure. I mean, if you want, I invited Mr. Evans to come. He was out of town. If you want him to come to the next meeting, I'm sure he would, given enough notice, he would come down if that's what you want to do. It's totally up to you. I don't know that there's any great hurry. Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I would like to invite him, and if he could invite somebody from CVS to be there as well. I mean, I don't think that he's going to have as much information about store I mean, he might, maybe he can ask for it, but I really would like to hear from maybe some kind of district manager of CVS as well, if they could stop by and talk to us maybe about some of those other concerns as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Can I have a question, Mr. Bonzo? In your last statement, you said if the store was having their overall sales were declining, and surely you don't mean that we want to boost their sales by letting them sell beer. I mean, for a CVS, it's a drug store. Soaps and stuff like that and groceries. Now, if a drug store can only survive by selling beer, and my family shops there often, so, but I mean, for them to survive by selling beer, I might have been misunderstood you, and if I said, I apologize.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. It's actually kind of interesting because down on Montgomery Road at Walgreens, one of the biggest things that they sell there is cigarettes. And so it's kind of ironic that a store like Walgreens, who is, they're really promoting health right now and really promoting like health clinics, that, they're selling cigarettes and really kind of contributing to, to not contributing to health in that view. But one of the respectful things about CVS Pharmacy and CVS, I guess, Health, I think is their overall company name, is that they've decided to commit to not selling cigarettes, and they've said that, hey, even though we're making money and it was 2% of their revenue at the time or profits at the time, they said no, we're not going to sell cigarettes and we're not going to further contribute to that. And I respect CVS for that. And so I personally wouldn't want to see if if CVS were to close one day, I wouldn't want to see more business go to Walgreens, even though I do shop at Walgreens because it's near my house, but I wouldn't want to see us pushing more business there where people have even greater access to cigarettes. So I guess it just depends on what you want to, if you want to look at that. The beer is the bad thing, the cigarettes, whatever it is, I think more people, well, I might be wrong, I would think more people die from cigarettes than from alcohol, but if they could get a few more sales, if they can get a few more sales and are able to, and that's what it is to keep the store open, then I would want to consider approving the trucks. Again, we haven't even heard from them, but I would just argue that it's something that we should for sure consider.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree, it needs to be looked at, and it needs to be considered if it's going to affect the store in itself closing, if that was an issue. But I also have a friend who owns 5 very nice apartment buildings right across the street, and he has major problems with drugs and alcohol over there. And quite honestly, I'd like to, talk to him, get his thoughts. But yes, I do agree that we really need to look at this.
So what I'm kind of understanding is from the general discussion is that you would like to ask me to have Mr. Evans come, as well as maybe the district manager from CVS at the next meeting. We have to dispose of this communication in some manner. Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to motion that we receive and file the letter, and that I'm going to stop with one motion. I'm going to motion that we receive and file the letter.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Bonsall. Any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. After we make this motion, I'll just make a second motion. After we dispose of this motion, I will make a second one to ask that we invite them. So.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor then is to receive and file the letter. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzoff?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move that we ask the Council President to invite the Council and the CVS District Manager to our next Council meeting.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter regarding executive session.
Dear Mr. Gears, my apologies for not sending this before the agenda went out. I am requesting that council go into executive session to discuss pending and imminent litigation at the end of its agenda at the regular council meeting scheduled for August 28th, 2018. Sincerely, Keith Moore, Norwood Law Director.
Mr. Braden,
Motion that we receive and file the letter and move into executive session
for the purpose
for the purpose of
pending and imminent
litigation.
as outlined in the
Thank you
letter.
very much.
Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Not that I'm trying to put words in your mouth. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We will move into executive session, so we ask that you, those in attendance, leave at this point in time. We are not allowed to take any action, make any decisions in executive session. If there are any decisions that need to officially be made, we will do that when we come out of executive session before we adjourn.